Three drunk friends stagger into a taxi late at night. The driver, noticing their state, immediately realizes they are too wasted to notice anything and decides to make some quick cash off them. After they climb in, he drives just a short distance, makes a quick turn, and announces confidently, "We're here!" The first drunk, completely oblivious, thanks the driver and stumbles out of the car. The second one, equally clueless, expresses his gratitude, hands the driver some cash, and exits. The third drunk, however, senses something is off. He pauses, eyes squinting, then suddenly winds up and slaps the driver with all his might. Startled, the driver yells, "What the hell is wrong with you?" The drunk, still swaying and pointing an accusing finger, slurs, "Don't you ever drive that fast again." 1. Jenny was sitting comfortably, flipping through her favorite magazine, when an ad suddenly pops up for an all-expenses-paid cruise at a jaw-dropping price of just $500. Bursting with excitement, she rushes to Jack, her husband, and waves the ad in his face. "Look, Jack!" she exclaims. "The cruise is in 2 days, and only $500. "I'll be straight with you," Jack says, looking up from his work. "I'm swamped and can't get away. But why don't you go and enjoy yourself?" Jenny feels a little let down, but her enthusiasm quickly returns, and she decides she'll make the most of the trip. The following day at work, Jack's co-worker, who also happens to be his mistress, approaches him excitedly. "Hey, Jack, look at this," she says eagerly. "There's a cruise tomorrow, and it's going for only $500. Jack, feigning disinterest, replies, "I'm not really a cruise kind of guy. Here's $500. Why don't you go and have a blast?" She eagerly agrees, and, as fate would have it, both his wife and his mistress end up on the same cruise. A few days later, Jenny returns home, brimming with stories of her amazing time, and starts showing Jack her vacation photos. As Jack flips through them, he spots Brenda, his mistress, in the background of several pictures. Pointing at her, he asks Jenny, "Who's that woman?" "Oh, her," Jenny says with a sniff of disdain. "I call her the cruise slut. She hooked up with half the men on board." The next day, Brenda comes to Jack's office, just as excited, sharing her own cruise experience along with her photos. While scrolling through the pictures, Jack sees Jenny, his wife, appearing in the background of several shots. He points at his wife and asks, "And who's that woman?" "Oh, her," says Brenda. "She's such a nice woman with all the men on board. She never left her husband's side for a second." 2. Bill was stranded on the side of the road, hitchhiking on a pitch-black night during a relentless rainstorm. The hours dragged on, and not a single car passed by. The rain was so heavy that Bill could barely see a few feet ahead of him through the downpour. Suddenly, through the sheets of rain, Bill spotted a car slowly making its way towards him. As it came closer, it stopped right in front of him. Desperate for shelter, and not thinking clearly, Bill jumped into the back seat of the car and slammed the door shut. It was only then that he noticed. No one was in the driver's seat, and the engine wasn't even running. Without a sound, the car began to creep forward on its own. Bill looked ahead and saw a sharp bend in the road coming up. His heart pounded and panic set in as he realized the danger he was in. Just before reaching the curve, a pale, ghostly hand reached through the open window and turned the steering wheel. Bill, frozen with fear, watched in horror as the ghostly hand reappeared every time the car approached a bend. When Bill saw the warm, welcoming lights of a pub in the distance, he summoned every ounce of courage, leapt from the moving car, and sprinted toward the building. Soaking wet and breathless, Bill barged into the pub and ordered 2 shots of scotch. Visibly shaken, he started recounting his terrifying experience to everyone around. As they listened, the entire pub fell silent, realizing Bill was deadly serious and completely sober. About 10 minutes later, two drenched men stumbled into the pub, panting. They looked around and spotted Bill trembling at the bar. One turned to the other and said, "Hey, Bruce, that's the idiot who got in the car while we were pushing it." 3. A businessman takes a much-needed vacation in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, his luck couldn't be worse. He loses all his money, blows through his life savings, and maxes out every credit card he owns. The only thing he has left is his return ticket home. Desperate, he hops into a taxi and explains his dire situation to the cabby, pleading for a ride to the airport. He even offers to leave his driver's license or any valuable item as collateral until he can mail the fare later. The cabbie scoffs and yells, "You don't even have $10 for a ride to the airport? Get out of my cab!" Humiliated, the businessman walks all the way to the airport, catches his flight home, and spends the next year tirelessly rebuilding his wealth. Determined to change his luck, he returns to Vegas. And this time, he hits the jackpot and wins big. Riding high on his success, he exits his hotel, ready to head to the airport. As he surveys the long line of taxis, he spots the very same driver who had refused to help him last year. Immediately, a mischievous plan forms in his mind. He gets into the first taxi in line and asks, "How much is it to the airport?" $10, replies the driver. He then leans in and asks, "And how much for a job?" "What? Get out of my cab!" the driver shouts, disgusted. The businessman proceeds to repeat this routine, moving down the line of taxis, receiving the same shocked reactions each time. Finally, he steps into the last cab, his old friend's cab, and asks, "How much to get to the airport?" $10, the driver replies, clearly not recognizing him. "Perfect," says the businessman, settling into the seat. As they drive past the line of taxis, the businessman makes eye contact with each driver, giving them a triumphant smile and an enthusiastic thumbs up. 4. A cabbie picks up a nun, and as she settles into the back seat, he can't help but keep glancing at her in the rearview mirror. The nun notices his constant staring and finally asks, "Is something bothering you, my son?" Embarrassed, the driver responds, "I do have a question, but I'm worried it might offend you." The nun smiles kindly and reassures him. "Oh, my dear child, you can't offend me. After so many years of being a nun, I've seen and heard just about everything. Go ahead, ask whatever is on your mind." The cabbie hesitates, but then blurts out, "Well, I've always had this secret fantasy to have a nun kiss me." The nun chuckles softly and says, "Well, let's see what can be done about that. First, you have to be single, and second, you must be a devoted Catholic." The cabbie's face lights up with excitement, and he quickly says, "Oh, I am. I'm single, and I'm Catholic too." The nun nods and says, "All right then, pull into the next quiet alley." The cabbie eagerly does as he's told, and the nun grants him his wish. But as they get back on the main road, the cabbie suddenly bursts into tears, overwhelmed with guilt. Concerned, the nun asks, "My dear son, why are you crying?" The cabbie sobs and confesses, "I have to come clean. I lied. I'm actually married, and I'm Jewish." The nun pats him on the shoulder and says with a smirk, "That's all right, my friend. My name's Kevin, and I'm headed to a Halloween party." 5. A philosopher, a mathematician, a chemist, and a physicist were relaxing at a cozy coffee shop, engaged in light banter. The physicist, with a smug grin, turns to the chemist sitting beside him and declares, "You know, chemistry is just applied physics." The group chuckles at the chemist's expense. Not to be outdone, the mathematician looks at the physicist and says with a smirk, "Well, physics is really just applied mathematics." The physicist laughs along, though the jab stings a bit. The philosopher, sensing an opportunity to join in, interjects confidently, "Ah, but mathematics is simply applied philosophy." The laughter roars even louder as everyone enjoys the moment. The mathematician, still chuckling, turns to the philosopher with a sly smile and says, "That's cute. Now shut up and go fetch the coffee I ordered." 6. An elderly lady gets into a sleek Mercedes Benz taxicab. As she settles in, the driver asks her where she's heading. She provides him with an address, explaining that she's just arrived in town to visit her family. After driving for a few minutes, the old lady notices the iconic Mercedes Benz emblem proudly mounted on the hood of the car. Curious, she points at it and asks, "What's that little ornament for?" The driver, spotting an opportunity for a bit of fun, decides to prank the old woman. "That's actually a special sight I had installed," he says with a straight face. "It helps me aim better when I'm targeting things." "Targeting things? What kind of things?" the lady asks, bewildered. The driver smirks and replies, "Well, you see that cyclist over there? I can't stand those cyclists, so I'm going to run him over." The woman gasps in horror as the driver speeds up, aiming the car directly at the oblivious cyclist. But just before impact, the driver swerves at the last second to avoid him. Suddenly, a loud thump echoes through the car, startling the driver. "What on earth was that noise?" the driver exclaims. The old lady, looking rather pleased, says, "Well, you can brag about that fancy sight of yours all you want, but if I hadn't opened the car door, we'd have missed the cyclist." 7. One morning, a man wakes up, looks out his window, and is shocked to see a huge gorilla lounging in his tree. Panicked, he searches through the phone book and finally finds a gorilla removal service. When the service guy answers, he asks, "Is it a male or female gorilla up there?" "Male," the man replies. "Oh, good. I've got just the solution. I'll be over in a jiffy," says the service guy confidently. An hour later, the service guy arrives, armed with an odd assortment: a stick, a chihuahua, a shotgun, and a pair of handcuffs. He turns to the man and explains his unusual plan. "All right, here's how it's going to go down. I'll climb up the tree and use this stick to poke the gorilla until he tumbles down. The moment he hits the ground, this well-trained chihuahua here will latch onto the gorilla's, vulnerable parts and bite them hard." The man nods, looking slightly uneasy, as the service guy continues. "The gorilla will instinctively cover himself in pain, which is when you swoop in and slap these handcuffs on him." The man, still trying to process everything, asks, "And, what's the shotgun for?" The service guy replies, "If I fall out of the tree before the gorilla, shoot the chihuahua." 8. Two wives, eager for some time away from their daily routines, finally plan a night out, just the two of them. After an evening of laughter, dancing, and more than a few drinks, they decide it's time to wobble home. On the way, both women suddenly have an urgent need to pee. They sneak into a nearby cemetery, take care of business, but quickly realize they have nothing to wipe with. One of the women, slightly tipsy and desperate, decides to use her underwear. The other, scanning her surroundings, grabs a wreath off a grave and uses that instead. The next day, their husbands are on the phone, discussing their concerns. "I'm not happy," says the first husband with frustration. "My wife came home without her underwear." "I hear you," replies the second husband in a resigned tone. "But if you think that's bad, my wife had a card stuck between her cheeks that read, From all the guys at the fire station, we will all miss you. 9. A man visits a ranch to inspect a horse he's interested in buying. The rancher proudly brings out a stunning mare, her coat glistening in the sunlight. Can I take a look at her teeth? The man asks politely. Absolutely, says the rancher, prying the mare's lips open to reveal her perfectly aligned teeth. Beautiful, the man nods approvingly. Mind if I check her tail and hooves? Go right ahead, partner, replies the rancher, turning the mare around to display her neatly braided tail and well-groomed hooves. Lovely, the man exclaims. Now, could I see her twat? What? The rancher barks, stunned. Her twat, sir, the man repeats calmly. Can I see your twat? The rancher, now furious, grabs the man by the collar, hoists the mare's tail high, and shoves the man's face right into the horse's backside. There you go, you sicko. Take a good look. The man pulls back, red-faced and sputtering, and says indignantly, I don't know why you did that, huffed the man, exasperated. All we wanted was to see her won. 10. A woman comes home, bursting with excitement, and tells her husband, Remember those horrible headaches I've been suffering with for years? Well, they're finally gone. No more headaches? The husband asks in shock. What happened? His wife smiles and replies, Margie referred me to a hypnotist. He told me to stand in front of a mirror, stare at myself, and repeat, I do not have a headache, I do not have a headache, I do not have a headache. And you know what? It actually worked. The headaches are completely gone. That's amazing, exclaims the husband, genuinely happy for her. Encouraged, his wife then suggests, You know, you haven't exactly been setting the bedroom on fire these past few years. Why don't you go see the hypnotist and see if he can help with that? The husband, a bit hesitant but willing to try, agrees and goes to the hypnotist a few days later. When he gets home, he storms in with newfound energy, rips off his clothes, scoops his wife up into his arms, and carries her straight to the bedroom. He gently places her on the bed and says, Don't move, I'll be right back. He rushes to the bathroom and moments later returns to make passionate love to his wife like never before. She's left breathless and says, Wow, that was incredible. The husband, determined, says, Don't move. I'll be right back. He goes back to the bathroom, returns, and round 2 is even better than the first. His wife is beyond impressed, feeling like she's in a dream. Oh my God, she gasps, unable to believe her luck. Once more, the husband tells her, Don't move, I'll be right back. Curious, the wife quietly follows him to the bathroom this time, only to find him standing in front of the mirror, chanting, She's not my wife! She's not my wife! She's not my wife! His funeral service will be held this Saturday. 11. A woman makes a stunning new friend at the gym. A gorgeous lady who always turns heads. A few months later, she excitedly receives a wedding invitation from her friend. Curious and thrilled, she asks, Oh my gosh, is this your first marriage? Actually, it's my 4th, says the friend with a confident smile. 4th? Gasps the woman, trying to hide her surprise. How interesting. Unable to contain her curiosity, she asks, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened to your first 3 husbands? The woman replies nonchalantly, The first one ate poisonous mushrooms and died. Oh, that's so tragic, she exclaims, genuinely horrified. And your second husband? He also ate poisonous mushrooms and died, the woman says matter-of-factly. The woman is now wide-eyed with shock. "Oh, no, that's terrible. I'm almost scared to ask about your third husband. Did he, eat poisonous mushrooms too?" "Oh, no," the friend says with a calm demeanor. "He died from a broken neck." "Broken neck?" asks her friend, confused and concerned. The woman calmly looks her in the eye and says, "He wouldn't eat his mushrooms." 12. A charming Russian lady approached me at the mall and said, "Please, I'm looking for a one-night stand." I quickly closed up the shop and locked the door before you could say Billy Bob. We went to a bar for a couple of aperitifs, enjoyed a nice dinner at a restaurant, hit up a club I know with a great floor show, and then I took the lovely lady home. Being a gentleman, I'll keep what happened next private. As the sun peeked over the windowsill, I smiled warmly at her sleepy face and asked, "So how was it?" "Wonderful," she replied with a smile. "But I still don't have a place to put my bedside lamp." 13. A guy had recently met a girl he really liked, so he'd tried to impress her every chance he got. One day they were at a Rolling Stones concert. The guy excused himself to go to the bathroom, but took a detour and headed straight to the band's backstage area. There, he found Mick Jagger getting ready. Our guy approached him and pleaded for Mick to come and chat with him at some point during the concert. He explained that he really liked his girlfriend and that they were both huge Rolling Stones fans, so it would mean the world to him if his girlfriend thought he was an acquaintance of Mick Jagger. "I don't know. I'm not sure I'll have time," said Mick Jagger hesitantly. "Please, Mr. Jagger, I promise I won't bother you again," he begged. "All right, fine. If it'll get you out of my hair," Mick Jagger agreed reluctantly. Later, during a break between songs, Mick Jagger stepped off stage and approached the guy and his girlfriend. "Hey, man, how's it going? I haven't seen you in ages," he said with a big smile. The guy looked at him impatiently and said, Mick, can't you see I'm talking to my girlfriend?" 14. A young man, dressed sharply, strides through the doors of the local coffee shop one Sunday morning. He sits down lazily and scans the place before raising his hand and summoning a waiter. "I would like your freshest coffee. None of that muddy stuff you probably make from yesterday's leftovers." The waiter assured him they brew fresh coffee several times a day. "I'll believe it when I taste it," the young man replied. "I'm from New York and I know good coffee. There's a slim chance you have good coffee here, so at least make a new batch for me." He then dismissed the waiter with a wave. The waiter goes to the kitchen and returns with a cup of steaming coffee. The man tastes it and immediately makes a face of disgust. "Just as I thought. That's not fresh. Come on, make me another one," he demands. The waiter heads back to the kitchen and, after some time, returns with a steaming and aromatic cup. He hands it to the gentleman, who takes a sip and spits it out instantly. He turns to the waiter and exclaims, "This is even worse. This coffee tastes like mud." The waiter, looking surprised, turns to the man and says, "But, sir, it's fresh ground." 15. A poor cowboy needs a horse. He buys the only one he can afford, but it has its commands all mixed up. "He'll go when you say, 'Whoa,' and stop when you say, 'Giddy up,'" instructs the seller. The cowboy sets off riding the horse, feeling awkward for saying, "Whoa." As he rides further, he sees a cliff approaching. He commands the horse to stop by saying, "Whoa," but the horse only speeds up. Panicking, the cowboy screams, "Whoa!" But the horse only goes into a full gallop. Realizing his mistake, he tries saying, "Giddy up." The horse comes to a complete stop mere inches from the edge of the cliff. The cowboy wipes the sweat from his forehead and says, "Whoa, that was close." The horse, possessing survival instincts, knew better than to run off a cliff, and the cowboy didn't face any repercussions for his poor choice of words.